a volunteer with Helping Hands here in Leisure Village West, and I am here today with Rory O'Connor, who is president of Helping Hands. And also behind the camera is Michael Maurizio of our TV station, KLVW, here in Leisure Village West. And the purpose of this video presentation is to give a tutorial on the repairs to our metal bifold doors. These metal bifold doors are most common in the willows section, and we get a lot of requests from residents who have problems with these doors that range from my door is off the track, or my doors won't open, or my doors won't close, or my doors get stuck. And the purpose, the purpose of being here is to point out that for every one of those complaints, there can be a multitude of causes. So we're going to look at the doors, look at how they work and how some of these problems can be resolved. Now, the first thing I want to do is show you my layout of tools. And what I have laid out here is just all my personal stuff. Everything here, with the exception of this box, pretty much fits into my one little tool bag here. And what I put together here is, the basic arrangement of flathead and Phillips head screwdrivers. I have a scratch awl that does not need to be needle sharp, and there is a purpose for that. Obviously, some pliers, some blunt head pliers. I like my little hemostats for getting into places that are on an angle, and then my big offset needle nose pliers. I have a nice pair of wire cutters, and like they say on NCIS, never leave home without a knife. So I always carry my utility knife with me with blades stored inside the handle. I also bring a tape measure and a small ruler, and I will show you the reasons why later on. Also a roll of blue painter's tape from Dollar Tree, nice and cheap. I also like to bring some little zip ties, because there are a lot of situations where you can get out of a problem with a zip tie. Now, something essential is a flashlight. You really have to have a reasonably good flashlight, something like this. And what I've also come up with recently is this is from Dollar Tree. I found these for $5. It is a rechargeable LED motion sensing light. And when it's on, it will be on for 10-15 seconds, and it'll go off, and then as you wave your hand, it'll come back on. Just like that. I have a torpedo level for checking things in level and plumb. I have a multi-tool, which I sometimes pack and sometimes use and sometimes don't. I also bring a bottle of 3-in-1 silicone lubricant that will help lubricate the bottom and the top guides for the sliders. Now, one point I'll make is to avoid using WD-40, because WD-40 tends to attract dust and dirt. The silicone lubricant does not do that. So I do recommend not using WD-40. I also like to bring some small wooden blocks, because if there's a time when you need to pry something up, raise the level of the door, you can get underneath it and use that wooden block as a fulcrum point. And those come in handy for that. Aside from that, I have this box which is set up for with parts for the metal bifold doors. We have the guide pins, we have the pivot pins, we have the sliders, we have the pin brackets, so on and so forth. And I also have packed here these open end and box end wrenches that are handy for getting into adjusting the bolts on the pivot brackets. I wanted to also point out that I have a step stool, which is essential on working on these doors. This one is personally mine. A lot of times when I go to a resident's home, they say that they have a step stool that I can use, but I always bring this with me. So the step stool is an essential part. Another item that I bring with me are these kneeling knee pads. I tend to bring 4 of these with me all the time. Recently, I've gone to using 6 of them. And when we're working on these doors, you'll see the reasons why. It's not only for your knees, but it's also to protect the floors and the walls of the resident's home. With that, I think our next item will be looking at the doors and looking at the basic structure that is involved, or looking at the structures that we are going to be involved with. I'm going to go over some basics of the structure of these doors. And the way they work is there is a bottom track. It's an aluminum channel track, and there's one bottom end on the ceiling. At the top corners on the inside, I'm not sure how to say this. Anyway, in these top corners is a fixed pivot bolt, a fixed pivot pin, which looks basically like that. Does that look good to you? And this pivot pin fits into this bracket, which is inside of the channel of that top channel bracket, top channel. Fits into that hole like so, and top and bottom, and that's where the corner of the door is fixed. At the middle of the door is a guide pin. It's called a guide pin. I sometimes call it a slider pin. And this is installed in the top and in the bottom. And what this does, this nylon slider is what guides the door. The flange of the guide pin fits inside of this slot. Maybe kind of hard to see, but it fits inside the slot like so, and the slider pin slides in the channel of that top bracket. There's one like this on the top, and there's one like this on the bottom. And point to make is that, I don't know how easy it will be to see this, if you can get this, Michael. The opening on the slider where the flange of the guide pin fits inside needs to always be facing the wall. It should not. Now, if this is on the left-hand side door, the opening will be facing to the left. If it's on the right-hand side of the door, it'll be facing toward the wall. And that will be the same on both the bottom and on the top. And this will be an issue that we will look into a little bit later. And as Rory was pointing out, what I'm going to show you are some techniques that I have developed myself from working on these doors over the last few years. And if you, the volunteer viewer, have any other ideas or techniques, feel free. Don't feel like you have to follow my lead. But this is how I've developed working on these doors. And as I said before, when we get requests, there can be a multitude of causes for a single little problem, or there can be one cause for a bunch of problems. And what I'm going to look at is when you come into the resident's home, you want to look at the door and see how it looks to start with. Do they close and open? Do they meet up in the middle? Do they have clearance on the side of the wall? When it opens, is it smooth like this, or when it opens, does it, strike on something? As you can see the sliders on the top, but you can't see the slider on the bottom. And to start right off the bat, I can tell just by doing this that the bottom guide pin has come out of the nylon slider that is inside that bottom track. So I'm going to get down on the floor, and I'm going to very easily pop that slider pin back into the guide pin back into the slider. What I have is this slider is what holds the guide pin. And if you can see the guide pin here, you can see the flange on the bottom of the guide pin, which is going to fit inside the slot of the slider on the bottom. Now, as I said before, that opening of the slider is supposed to be facing the wall, but it's not. So I'm just going to, for simplicity purposes, I'm going to just slide this back in here. And hopefully we're going to hear a click. Or actually, we're just going to see it click into place. And now that guide pin is back into the slider where it belongs. So it's not making that clacking noise where the bottom of the guide pin was striking on the screws holding the bottom track in place. So this part of the situation is fixed. Although probably what I'll have to do later, not right now, but I will go back and take that slider out and get that slider turned around. Now, what I am going to do is, because I know that on this side, this slider is not facing the right direction. So what I'm going to do is, with Rory's help, we're going to take this door down completely, and I'm going to take up this portion of the bottom track to get that slider out and turn it around facing the right direction. Okay, what I'm going to do is release the guide pins at the top and the bottom. I'm going to pop them out of the sliders so that I can pull the door open in order to get to the inside fixed pivot pin. The way I can do this is with the tip of the scratch awl. I can get it, if I can get in there. Oh, I just got it out. And so I'm happy about that. Next, I will take the step stool now, and I will go and do the same thing at the top guide pin. And now the top guide pin here is taken out so you can swing the door open all the way. Now you can see the fixed pivot pin at the top and down at the bottom. These fit into this bracket, which is inserted into the track like this. Same thing on the bottom. This one is spring-loaded. The one on the bottom is fixed. And in order to take this down, what I'm going to do is pull down on this top pivot pin and release it from the bracket. Okay, got it. Now, this is an important point for everybody to keep in mind. This pivot pin is very close to the ceiling. So when you're taking this down, you want to be very careful not to scratch the ceiling. And what you need to do is just maneuver the door in a way that you can easily lift and free the bottom pivot pin and then lay the door down. Now, also, at this point, this is where these extra knee pads come in. Because in order to prevent damaging the client's floors or walls, I like to pad everything out with these pins, or I'm sorry, with these knee pads. Now, here's another interesting and important part, and that is the placement of these pivot pin brackets at the top and the bottom corner. These pivot pin brackets are set to be 2.5 inches. If you look here at this hole in the bracket, this hole should be at 2.5 inches from the wall, not from the molding and not from that trim, but from the wall. It should be 2.5 inches. And that should be the same at both the top and the bottom. That's what will ensure that the door is, and this one also is at 2.5 inches. This is what ensures that the door will be in plumb, straight up and down. And that's what helps make sure that they meet securely in the middle. Now, I mentioned that I'm going to take up this bottom track to get the slider, or the nylon guide pin slider, out of the track and turn it around. Or actually, this one I think I can just simply turn around because it's in healthy condition. It looks really good, slides back and forth nicely. So what we're going to do now is take out 4 of these screws, which should allow me to lift this bottom track out and slide this guide pin slider out of the track. Now hopefully I'll be able to do this fairly easily. Now this is a place where if you have power tools that you want to bring with you, that can always be helpful. Now, in some cases, I have seen where units that have been flipped have had these door systems taken down, but when they're put back in, sometimes they're just not put in correctly at all, or they're put in such a way that they're not easily accessible. Now, I've experienced this situation in other places in my own home where this track was put in, but it was cemented or glued down to the wooden strip that holds it in. But see, I've got it lifted up just far enough down at this end that I can pull it out beyond the wall. Before I slide this out, I need to move the guide pin bracket, and I can either use a screwdriver or you can use one of the open-end box wrenches from the tool kit or the toolbox, the parts box. Now, this is very nice and dirty, so I'm going to try and clean that out. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm removing the nylon slider, because this opening here should be facing the other way. It should be toward the door. And we're going to slide that out, turn it around, and slide it back in. Hopefully that's easy for everybody to see. You can see the grooves on the side that fit into the flange on the top lip of the track. Now we get that put back in, and at this point, let's see, I would, oh, look at this. This resident just happened to leave a nice roll of paper towels here for me. So I can get in here and kind of wipe this out a little bit. And when it comes to communicating with the resident, it's always a good idea to emphasize keeping these tracks cleaned out by vacuuming regularly and cleaning them out as much as possible. That always helps to keep things running smoothly. Now what I'm going to do, because this old bracket is so old and cruddy looking, I'm going to put in this new one. And that happens by just sliding the entire thing into the sidebar, or the slider, or the bottom track, and then I can get it put back down. And once again, what I'm going to do is check the measurement and make sure that the hole for the fixed guide pin, the fixed pivot pin, is at 2.5 inches, which it is right here. So I can hold that in place and start to tighten down this locking bolt to keep that in place. And I do keep, and I do need the other wrench, unless I can use this. Hey, Rory, are you there?
Yep.
There's one of the box wrenches in the parts box.
Okay.
Um,
Over.
I think the largest one is the one that I want. Or I could take all three of them.
All three might be good.
Thank you. Okay. I like to keep checking and keep checking and keep checking so that you don't have to try and go back and fix something else later on. And it's basically the same thing as saying measure twice, cut once.
Stop the video.
And
We're serious. Stop the video.
so I've got the pivot pin bracket in place, and it's nice and tight inside there. My slider is in place here, so I can start reinserting these screws into the, I guess you'd call it, it's like a carpet strip that they nail the carpet down to, but in this case I just call it a wooden shim spacer that we screw these screws into. Now, a lot of these are slotted screws, which can be kind of a pain to work with. And I do make the practice of carrying spare screws with me. And if you know the right size, length, and thread of the screw, you can replace these if need be. If you can reuse the same ones, then by all means. Sometimes when you take these screws out and you find that the attachment is stripped out or the screw is stripped, but you want to get that back in there, what I find is I can take one of these zip ties and get into the part that has the catching part on it, cut this off and stick it into the screw hole, and then put your screw in, and that will give the screw a good bite to be able to tighten down on. I don't need to use that here, but I have used that in the past where the screw hole wasn't letting the screw bite into it tightly. So taking that little piece of a zip tie, sticking it in the hole, putting your screw in, solves that problem. I've used it in so many other ways that it's a nice little trick to have up your sleeve. All right, now we're going to get ready to put the door back up. But before I do, I want to set up my step stool properly.
Yes.
And just double check the pivot pin at the top corner. I want to make sure that that hole for the pivot pin is at 2.5 inches. And I'm actually going to adjust that just slightly because it's about just a little bit off. So I'm going to line that up to 2.5 inches and tighten that down while I'm holding it in place. And that should be good. So my pivot pin is tight, my slider is loose, and I think we can put the door back up now. Okay, here's where sometimes things get tricky, because this bottom guide pin, which fits into the slider in the track, when this is manufactured, this has, or it did have, this would have had a speed nut placed to hold it in place here, so that it would be at the right height and the right level. But that speed nut always disappears, and I've always had to deal with finding a way to hold this in place, because since this isn't held in place, once you pick the door up, this is going to fall out on the ground. Now also, when you look, you see there are two holes here. I don't know what that one's for, but this one is for where the guide pin goes. So choose the one closest to the edge of the door, and that should be the right place. Now what I do here is, the reason that I brought my blue painter's tape. And what I do is just take a strip of tape and I kind of wrap it around the corner of the door in a way that will keep the guide pin from falling out. And when I have everything in place, I can very easily peel this piece of tape off, and it'll be out of the way and we'll be good to go. Now here is the fixed pivot pin for the bottom track, and this is the guide pin that fits into the slider in the bottom track. We have the same thing at the top of the door, and the difference is at the top of the door, the fixed guide pin is spring-loaded. So you need to pull it down, position the door in the proper place, and then release that pivot pin so that the top attaches into the hole in the top bracket. And this will be the same thing with the guide pin. The guide pin is also spring-loaded, and what you'll have to do here is when you want to insert the guide pin into the slider in the top bracket, you'll have to push it up and hold it in order to get it into position to fit into the slider. And we should be ready to try and put this back up now. Now, Rory and I are going to pick the door up, and we're going to you're going to lift you around towards me. And what we can do is put it down right here. And here again, I'm trying to be very careful about getting this set right so that we're not scratching the ceiling with that top pivot pin. And what I can do, if you can see this, Michael.
Tape the top pin down. Tape the top pin down.
The spring is too tight. It won't hold.
Okay, I'll hold it while you
Tape
put
and
this
hold.
in.
Now, if you can see down at that bottom corner, the bottom pivot pin is just about perfectly placed to drop into the hole in that pivot pin bracket. And I'm gonna go down. I'm gonna see if that's actually okay. I'm going to kneel down. Oh, it just went in.
ceiling.
Okay, yeah, that bottom pivot pin is in the bracket. And we're going to get up to place this top pivot pin into the upper bracket. Now something felt like it just gave way. So I'm going to come back down. Okay, that's actually in there. The top and the bottom brackets are good, and the door is moving fine. So my next step is to fit the top guide pin into the top slider. You can see the slider there, and when I push up, you can see my guide pin with flange. And all I need to do is get that guide pin set up in there. I'm going to push it, and we heard that click. And so we know that that top guide pin is situated into the slider in the top guide. Now we're going to do the same thing in the bottom, but sometimes this gets a little more complicated because you literally do have to get down and dirty. And this is where your ability to do push-ups comes in handy. Excuse me. Now is when I can remove this piece of tape, and you can see that my bottom guide pin has dropped down into sight. And what I need to do, we can see that pretty easily there. The flange of the guide pin is fitting into the slot on the slider, and if this likes to be easy, which it was, it just fits right into the slider. Actually, it's already done. Okay. So try it now. And that sounds pretty good. Now, one last thing. And of course, I am making kind of a mess, but since this is my house, I won't worry about it. But I'm always careful and try to be conscious of not leaving behind a mess with the resident's home. And I'll get back to more on that later. At this point, what I like to do, and this is where having rags, scrap, or just rags of any kind, and I find that if you ever go into the hospital once, you come home with about 25 pairs of these socks. So I like to use these as garage rags. And what I want to do is take my 3-in-1 silicone lubricant, squirt a little bit of it into the rag, and I'm going to apply this to the upper track, just to give it a little bit of lubrication. And that'll help keep the, and you can see how much dirt comes off of this. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom, just to give it a little bit of lubrication. And that's working very nicely. And I'm happy with that performance. Now, I'm going to go back and do the same thing to this door later on. I think we've covered pretty much everything. We finished getting our door back up and it's working beautifully. And I would like to thank Michael Maurizio from KLVW-TV here in Leisure Village West, and also Rory O'Connor, president of the Helping Hands, for his help. And we hope you have found this video informative and helpful. And we hope to be doing more videos like this as a series of tutorials and info videos. So we'd like to thank you for joining us, and may the Helping Hands be with you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Really appreciate your expertise in the folding doors. They're a big problem in the village, and Chris has become our resident expert at it. We have quite a few very valuable volunteers who bring great value to the residents in this village. If you would like to become a Helping Hands volunteer, we can be reached at 732-657-2842. Just leave your name and phone number. We will set you up with any job you wish to perform.